Audrey's voice, smooth as silk and sharper than glass, cut through the sophisticated murmur of the restaurant. "Mom, are you going to pay cash or put it on a payment plan?" I froze. My fingers, hidden inside my worn handbag, were already trembling. Around the huge, ornate table, 16 people, strangers, mostly stopped mid-conversation. The clinking of silverware, the soft background jazz, everything dissolved into a sudden, thick silence. Before we continue, check if you are subscribed to the channel, and write in the comments where you are watching this video from. We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. My daughter Audrey stood beside me, radiating perfection in a tailored emerald dress. In her hand, held up for all to see, was a small black leather folder. Inside, the paper that held my doom. $50,000, she whispered, leaning down just enough so I could see the number. Her smile, which looked so kind to the watching family, was one I knew too well, the triumphant, calculated grin of a predator. $50,000 on prime A5 Wagyu steaks, imported French champagne, and a feast fit for a king. I glanced around the table. Empty plates were stacked in precarious towers. A small, glittering pyramid of empty wine bottles, labels I recognized as impossibly expensive, stood in the center. Everyone was looking at me. Julian's family, Audrey's husband's relatives, stared with a voyeuristic curiosity, watching a private spectacle they knew they shouldn't enjoy, but couldn't look away from. I took a slow, deep breath, forcing a small smile. I reached into my purse, moving with painstaking deliberation, as if searching for a thick wad of bills. My fingers felt numb, but I kept my composure, refusing to meet Audrey's expectant, victorious eyes. This was a trap. I knew it the moment the black-suited waiter led me into this place. For days ago, Audrey had called. Her voice had been soft, almost pleading, a tone she hadn't used since she was a little girl wanting a pony. "Mom, please, it's just a small family gathering. Julian's parents, maybe 2 or 3 cousins. I just need you there. It's important to me." She had insisted it was nothing formal, maybe just a simple barbecue. I hesitated, as I always did when Audrey sounded too sweet. We hadn't truly connected in years. But she was my only child, my only daughter. I missed the woman she used to be. I arrived precisely at 7 o'clock. This place, the Gilded Cage, was far too opulent for any simple family barbecue. Crystal chandeliers, velvet curtains, and a scent of old money and rare mahogany. The maitre d' took my name and led me to the back. And there they were. A banquet table set for 16 people. Everyone was dressed in evening wear, looking as if they had just stepped out of a magazine. I felt instantly conspicuous in my best floral dress, the one I usually saved for Easter Sunday. Audrey saw me. She rushed over, offering a quick, cold hug that didn't last a second, before pulling me to the table. "Everyone," she announced, her voice booming. "This is my mother, Clara." A few polite nods, a couple of strained smiles. I was seated between 2 severe-looking matrons who never stopped their own animated conversation to acknowledge me. The wine waiter poured me a glass of deep red, bitter wine without asking, and Julian, Audrey's husband, raised a glass for a toast to family and success. The dinner was a spectacle. Waiters glided in with enormous platters. I watched Julian's father order a massive tomahawk steak. Julian's mother requested imported scallops and lobster tails. No one consulted me. Audrey simply ordered for me. Just bring her the standard mixed grill. I ate little. A knot of cold dread was tightening in my stomach. I watched my daughter laugh, tossing her sleek dark hair. She was immaculate in her tight black designer dress, and the diamond pendant Julian had given her. She was a picture of controlled, untouchable success. My thoughts drifted, as they often did, to my small 2-room flat. The constant, musty smell of mold on the bedroom wall. The bathroom where the landlord had promised to fix the leaking tap for 7 months. My Social Security income, $750 a month. That money had to cover everything: rent, food, medication, utilities. Audrey knew. She had visited once 2 years ago, her face etched with a look of distaste. "Mom, you need to find something better," she had said, offering no help, no inquiry into my needs. The desserts arrived. Gold flake chocolate mousse, artisan gelato, and Audrey ordered another bottle of champagne to celebrate. The waiter placed the black bill folder on the table. Audrey snatched it immediately. She opened it, her red manicured nails, a ritual we used to share when she was a small girl, catching the candlelight. She stood up, commanding the silence she craved. "Well, family," she said, her voice loud and theatrical. "What a magnificent celebration. And all of this has been made possible by my generous mother, who insisted on paying for the entire evening." The silence returned, heavier this time. Every eye swiveled to me. Julian's mother set her wine glass down sharply. Julian's father coughed. Audrey sauntered toward me, slow and deliberate, placing the black folder in front of me. "So, Mom," she purred, looking down. "Cash or installments?" $50,000. The number seemed to burn into my retina. It represented over 5 years of my entire income. It was more money than I had ever possessed at one time in my 70 years of life. I looked up at Audrey. She held my gaze with that flawless, self-satisfied smile, waiting for me to crumple, waiting for me to apologize, cry, or be overcome with the public shame she had manufactured. That was the whole purpose of this elaborate, cruel dinner. My fingers went inside my handbag. The worn fabric of the inner lining felt familiar. I fumbled past my keys and a small bottle of cheap pain medication until I found my wallet. It was thin, synthetic, and cracking at the edges. Everyone leaned in slightly, trying to catch a glimpse. Audrey's smile widened. "Perfect, Mom," she cooed, that condescending sweetness back in her voice. "I knew I could rely on you." I opened the wallet and placed it on the white tablecloth. Slowly, deliberately, I counted out the bills. A 20, another 20, then a 10, followed by 5 ones. I placed the crumpled, meager collection next to the black bill folder. Then I added the change. A quarter, a dime, and 5 pennies. The metallic sounds echoed loudly in the cavernous silence. $95 lay scattered on the immaculate linen. I looked up at Audrey. Her smile vanished. Her eyes narrowed, confusion battling with anger. "This is all I have," I stated, my voice coming out steady and clear, fueled by a sudden protective heat. $95. It's all the money I have left until my next Social Security payment at the end of the month. That's 12 days from now. The silence became agonizingly deep. Julian shifted in his chair. Audrey's mother-in-law, a perpetually composed woman, let out a small audible gasp. Audrey remained motionless, but the hand holding the bill folder now trembled violently. "Mom, this isn't the time for jokes," she hissed, her sweetness gone, replaced by a tense, icy edge. "I'm not joking, Audrey," I replied, feeling an unexpected strength flooding my body. "This is my reality. My income is $750 a month. $600 goes to rent for that moldy flat. The rest covers food, medication, and utilities. This," I pointed at the small pile of bills, "is all that remains. You know this. You saw where I live a few years ago. You know I don't have $50,000. Her face cycled through confusion, annoyance, and finally, a flash of humiliation, but it passed instantly. "But Mom," she argued, lowering her voice, now sounding defensive, "you told me you were delighted to host the dinner. You said you wanted to celebrate Julian's new promotion with his entire family." "I never said that," I corrected her, my voice steeling. "You called me 4 days ago, begging me to attend a small, intimate dinner with just you and Julian. You never mentioned 16 guests. You never mentioned I was expected to pay a $50,000 bill." Julian cleared his throat, looking desperately uncomfortable. "Audrey," he murmured, "perhaps there was a miscommunication." She snapped her head toward him, her eyes blazing. "There was no miscommunication. My mother perfectly well knows this dinner was to celebrate your success. She insisted on organizing it and paying for it. She wanted to show her generosity." That lie, spoken with such conviction, momentarily made me question my own memory. But I held fast. I remembered that Tuesday phone call, the pleading tone. It was all a calculated performance. Suddenly, Julian's mother cleared her throat, not out of discomfort this time, but with a surprising authority. "Excuse me, Clara," she said, her voice soft but sharp, like velvet covering a knife. "I'm genuinely confused. Audrey told us that you had insisted on hosting this dinner to get to know us better, that you'd received a large inheritance and wanted to do something special with the money. She even said it would be an insult to you if we offered to pay. I felt a sickening flush of heat creep up my neck. An inheritance. The last thing my husband left me was a pile of debts that took 5 years of cleaning other people's houses to clear. I didn't organize anything, I told Julian's mother, meeting her eye without flinching. I didn't know anyone here except Julian's parents until tonight. And I certainly don't have any inheritance. Audrey dropped the bill folder onto the table with a loud slap. This is absolutely unbelievable, she cried, her voice trembling with genuine rage now. You are deliberately embarrassing me in front of my husband's family. I stood up. My knees were shaking, but my legs held me firm. No, Audrey, I said, my voice rising slightly. You put me here. You lied to me. You brought me here knowing exactly where I live and how I struggle. I live in a flat where the walls are covered in mold, where I have to choose between buying enough food or saving for the gas bill. You know this because you saw it. You chose to use my situation as a weapon. She opened her mouth, but the words wouldn't come out. Her eyes were suddenly bright, but not with tears of sorrow, with sheer, frustrated fury. Julian rose again. Clara, I assure you, this is a terrible misunderstanding. I shook my head. No misunderstanding, Julian. Your wife planned this right down to the last dollar. I picked up my handbag and began collecting my $95, one bill at a time. My hands shook, and the coins rattled across the table. No one moved to help me. I picked up every penny. Just as I turned to leave, a voice rang out, firm, calm, and utterly commanding. Wait, Helen. Please don't go yet. It was an older woman at the end of the table. She was elegantly dressed, with magnificent silver hair and a string of large pearls. She stood up slowly, her movements measured and graceful. My name is Victoria, she said, approaching me. I am Julian's great-aunt. I think we need to understand something before anyone leaves. She took my arm gently. Her touch was warm. She looked straight at Audrey. Audrey, 3 weeks ago, you called me personally to invite me. You told me your mother insisted on this dinner. You said she was wealthy now, having come into a significant inheritance, and wanted to show off her generosity by treating her new extended family. Victoria paused, tightening her grip on my arm. You assured us it would be an insult if we offered to contribute. That's why we ordered so freely. That's why none of us brought enough tonight to cover this bill. Victoria turned back to me, squeezing my arm. Now I find out Clara knew nothing of this, has no inheritance, and is living on a tiny fixed income. She faced the table, her voice ringing with the authority of someone who commanded respect. So either we have a colossal breakdown of communication, or we have a colossal deliberate lie perpetrated against all of us. And I intend to find out which one it is right now. The air in the restaurant was suddenly thin, heavy with unspoken accusations. Audrey, cornered, stammered, Aunt Victoria, you're being harsh. It was a misunderstanding. I truly thought Mom was financially stable. She never told me she was living in such difficult conditions. When I called her, I simply assumed she could help with the expenses. Victoria's expression remained perfectly serene, yet utterly unwavering. A misunderstanding, Audrey? She repeated, the word dripping with skepticism. You visited your mother's flat 2 years ago. She has just told 16 people, including us, that her walls are covered in mold, that her hot water doesn't work, and that her income is $750 a month. You knew exactly what condition your mother was in. You brought her here, allowed us to order $50,000 worth of food and drink, and planned to leave her with a debt she could never repay. Victoria's voice had barely risen above a firm conversational tone. Yet the impact was devastating. Julian jumped up again, clearly agitated. Aunt, with respect, you're making this sound deliberate. Audrey made a mistake, that's all. Victoria turned her steely gaze on him. A mistake, Julian, is wearing 2 different socks. This is calculated. Your wife lied to her entire extended family, made us unwitting accomplices in her scheme, and worst of all, sought to humiliate her own mother, a woman who, by her own account, sacrificed everything she had for her daughter. Julian went visibly pale. He opened his mouth but no sound came out. He slowly sat back down, defeated. Julian's father, who had been silent and rigid throughout the escalating confrontation, finally spoke. His voice was a low, tired rumble. Victoria is absolutely correct. This is fundamentally wrong. We owe Clara a profound apology, and we owe her the honest truth about what exactly is happening here. Audrey collapsed back into her chair, her facade finally cracking. She put her hands over her face, her slender shoulders shaking. I watched her, not with satisfaction but with a chilling numbness. "Fine," she choked out, her voice barely a whisper. "You're all right. You're all absolutely right." She took a ragged breath and removed her hands. Her eyes were dry but filled with a tormented frustration. "I knew Mom didn't have the money," she admitted, the words spilling out fast. "I knew exactly how she lived. I saw that disgusting flat 2 years ago. The mold, the broken pipes, the tiny kitchen where you can barely turn around. And I was ashamed, Mom. I was utterly ashamed that Julian's family, or Julian himself, might see it. I was ashamed of what they would think of me, that I could have such a destitute mother." The words landed like physical blows. Victoria gently squeezed my arm again. Audrey continued, tears finally beginning to fall, not out of remorse for me, but out of self-pity and resentment. "So I started pulling away. I stopped visiting. I stopped calling. I kept you hidden from my life because I didn't want anyone to know my origins. But then Julian got his promotion," she hurried on. "His family insisted on a big celebration dinner. And suddenly everyone started asking about you. Aunt Victoria asked if I'd invite you. Julian's mother said it would be lovely to include you." I panicked. She ran her expensive manicured hands through her hair. "So I came up with this stupid, desperate plan. I thought if I brought you here, if I put you in a situation where you had to publicly admit in front of Julian, in front of his accomplished, wealthy family, that you had no resources, then they would see it wasn't my fault. They would see you were just poor, and I couldn't possibly be held responsible for rescuing you." I stared at her, horrified, my voice a broken whisper. "You wanted to humiliate me. You wanted everyone to witness your mother's poverty, so they would stop expecting you to help me." Audrey nodded slowly, miserably. "Yes, that's exactly what I wanted. Because I'm tired, Mom. I'm tired of feeling like everyone expects me to be your savior. I have my own life. Julian and I just bought our mansion, an $800,000 house in the Crest. We have a massive mortgage. We drive luxury SUVs. We take 2 international trips every year. And you?" She looked at me with a raw, ugly resentment. "You live in that rotting apartment. I know everyone thinks I'm a terrible daughter, but nobody understands the pressure I feel. Deserve to enjoy my success without feeling guilty all the time." Victoria finally released my arm and took a step towards Audrey. Her face was stern, her previous compassion completely gone. "So this dinner," Victoria stated slowly, her voice cold and heavy, "was not a celebration of Julian's success. It was a public trial. You engineered your mother's failure to justify your abandonment of her." Audrey offered no defense. "I am 78 years old, Audrey," Victoria said. "I have witnessed much human cruelty. But to treat the woman who raised you alone, the woman who worked herself to the bone so you could have an education, a better life, to treat her like this, is something I find unforgivable." She turned sharply to Julian. "You knew about this financial fraud, Julian?" Julian vehemently shook his head. "No, Aunt. I swear I didn't. Audrey told me Clara was excited to host and insisted on paying. I never ever would have agreed to this if I had known the truth." Victoria studied him for a long, quiet moment. "I believe you," she said, nodding once. "But now you know. What are you going to do about the $50,000 bill your wife arranged?" Julian looked from his wife to his family and finally to me. "I'm paying it," he declared firmly. "I will pay the entire bill. And I will apologize to Clara on behalf of my wife for this monstrous situation. I will drive her home myself. Victoria nodded again. That is the beginning. I stood motionless, the magnitude of Audrey's betrayal finally sinking in. She hadn't just been neglectful. She had actively, cruelly plotted my destruction. The little girl who used to hug me tight before school was truly gone. In her place was this woman, who now looked at me with open resentment. I took a few steps back from the table. Victoria reached out a hand, but I gently shook my head. I couldn't accept charity in this moment of raw clarity. Julian approached me. Clara, please let me take you home. I can get you a taxi or I will drive you. I raised my hand, stopping him. No, I said, my voice echoing with new strength. I don't need your ride, Julian. I don't need your compassion or your apologies. The only thing I need is to get out of this place. I grasped my worn handbag, feeling the tiny weight of my $95 inside. I had to make that money last 12 more days. I looked at Audrey, who was now weeping freely, but out of spite, not sorrow. I gave you everything I had. I told her, my voice quiet, but carrying the weight of 70 years. I worked cleaning other people's dirt for years so you could stand here today, in a designer dress, calling me an embarrassment. I gave you my past, my present, and you tried to steal my future. I turned my back on the table, on the stunned family, and on the daughter who had betrayed me. The bill is yours, I said simply. I ordered nothing but the basic mixed grill. I walked toward the exit, ignoring the murmurs behind me. The waiter opened the heavy mahogany door. I stepped out onto the cold, clean night pavement, taking a deep, shuddering breath of air that wasn't contaminated by expensive lies. My flat was 36 blocks away. I started walking. I had walked perhaps a dozen steps when I heard hurried footsteps behind me. I turned to see Victoria, Julian's great-aunt, quickly catching up. She wore an expensive cashmere shawl draped over her shoulders, and her purse was clutched in her hand. She was slightly breathless when she reached me. Clara, wait please, she insisted. She stopped in front of me, her wise gray eyes searching mine. I am not going to allow you to walk home alone at this hour. My car is parked 2 blocks away. You must let me take you. I shook my head, exhausted. That is not necessary, Victoria. You have already done too much. I cannot be a burden to anyone else. She frowned, her expression sharp. A burden? That is the exact word your daughter used inside, wasn't it? That she perceives you as a burden? Let me tell you something, Clara. You are a woman who deserves respect, safety, and dignity. If your own flesh and blood cannot see that, then I shall stand in her place. She took my arm gently, but with a surprising firmness that brooked no argument. Come. My car is close. We can talk on the way or we can be silent. But I will not leave you alone tonight. Her quiet authority finally broke through my defenses. I nodded, and we walked together toward her vehicle, a large, silver sedan that looked impeccably maintained. The back seat was plush, and the car smelled faintly of expensive lavender. Victoria didn't start the engine immediately. She just sat, hands on the steering wheel, looking straight ahead at the lamplit street. I lost my husband 5 years ago, she said suddenly, her voice low. 52 years of marriage. When he died, my children insisted I move in with them. They cited my age. It was dangerous for me to live alone. But I knew the real reason. They saw me as a responsibility, a problem to be managed, a weight on their own busy, perfect lives. She turned to look at me, a sad, knowing smile touching her lips. I refused. I told them I preferred my independence, even if it meant loneliness. And I learned that loneliness, while painful, hurts less than the rejection disguised as familial obligation. Her words struck a deep chord. I had held back the tears all night, maintaining my composure through the humiliation. But now, in the safety of this lavender-scented car, with this near stranger who understood my deepest pain, the tears finally came. I wept silently, covering my face with my hands. Victoria didn't offer empty platitudes. She simply reached out, took my hand and squeezed it gently, a gesture of silent, powerful solidarity. When the tears finally subsided, I wiped my face. Victoria offered me a crisp, white linen handkerchief embroidered with the initials V. "Thank you," I murmured. "There is nothing to thank me for," she replied, starting the engine. "Now tell me where you live, and I will take you home." I gave her the address. The ride was quiet as we drove out of the pristine downtown area and into the older, grittier sections of the city. I thought about the brave, determined little girl Audrey had been, and wondered where that courageous spirit had gone. "You're still very quiet," Victoria observed softly. "I'm thinking," I replied, "about the house." She glanced at me. "The house." I told her the story, the words tumbling out like a confession I had kept buried for years. "My husband died 14 years ago," I began. "He left nothing but debts from his construction business. It took me 5 years working every odd job possible to clear them. But we had a house. Not a mansion, but ours. I kept paying the mortgage little by little. When Audrey went to university and married Julian, I was still paying. Then I started falling behind." I swallowed, the lump returning to my throat. 3 years ago, I was facing foreclosure. The bank was threatening to seize it. Audrey came to visit. She told me she had met a lawyer who could help me refinance the mortgage, protect the house. She said I just needed to sign some papers, and the house would be safe. Victoria pulled over in front of my dilapidated building. The paint was peeling, and the front door was broken and creaked as I pushed it open. "What happened, Clara?" she asked, already knowing the terrible answer. We walked up the creaking stairs to the 3rd floor. The hallway smelled of dampness and stale cooking. When I opened the door to my flat, Victoria stepped inside. She saw the mold patches, the old, wobbly furniture, the tiny kitchen, and the broken window. She said nothing, but her contained sadness was palpable. 2 months later," I whispered, sitting on my old chair, "I got a notice from the bank. The house had been sold. I had 30 days to vacate." I called Audrey, frantic. She finally told me the truth. The papers I signed weren't refinancing documents. They were sales documents. She had bought the house from me, under the pretense of saving it. Victoria's eyes narrowed with anger. "And she sold it?" "Yes. 6 months later. She said she and Julian needed the money for the down payment on their $800,000 mansion. She sold my house for $180,000. I had already paid down the mortgage significantly. There was less than $50,000 left. That means there was almost $130,000 in equity that I had built with my own labor." I looked at the moldy wall. Since the house was in her name, all that money went to her. She gave me $5,000 and called it a starting fund. $5,000 out of the $130,000 that belonged to me. I used it for the deposit on this place, and I've been living on my $750 pension ever since. Victoria sat heavily on my narrow bed. She put her face in her hands. "My God, Clara," she murmured, her voice raw. "Your daughter robbed you. She orchestrated a complex financial fraud. She made you sign documents under false pretenses, and she stole your equity, your security, and your independence to pay for her life of luxury. I never thought of it as theft," I confessed, the word feeling too harsh, too real. "She was my daughter. I trusted her." Victoria looked up, her gray eyes blazing with a fierce determination. "Do you still have those documents, Clara? The copies of the sale? Any bank statements showing that $5,000 deposit?" "Yes," I said, pointing to a dusty shoebox in the closet. "I keep all my papers there." "Good," Victoria said, standing up. "Because what Audrey did is not only illegal, it is a moral crime. And we are going to fight her." Victoria opened the shoebox and began sifting through my disorganized collection of bills and receipts. Her hands, despite her age, moved quickly and efficiently. After several minutes, she pulled out 3 specific documents and placed them on the bedspread. "Here it is," she announced, holding up a paper. "The property transfer document, signed by you, Clara. And here is the official sales document for the house, listing the price at $180,000. And this," she held up a 3rd paper, her voice hardening, This is a sworn affidavit you signed, fraudulently stating that you received the full monetary value of the house in cash. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. But I only received $5,000. She knows that. Exactly, Victoria affirmed. This document is the proof of her fraud and forgery. If we can prove you only received $5,000, we prove the entire transaction was based on deception. Do you still have your bank statements from that time? Yes, I believe so, I replied, pointing to a bundle tied with an old rubber band. Victoria retrieved the bundle, her mind already working at high speed. She paced the tiny floor space of my apartment. Clara, listen to me very carefully. What Audrey did is a clear case of fraud by inducement to error. She manipulated your trust as her mother to steal your primary asset. With this evidence, we can file a lawsuit and reclaim what is rightfully yours. I can't afford a lawyer, Victoria, I whispered, the crushing financial reality always present. I have less than $100 to my name. Victoria knelt down again, bringing her face level with mine, her gray eyes burning with intensity. She took both my hands firmly in hers. Your daughter stripped you of everything you had. She used your trust, your maternal love to leave you here, while she enjoys a mansion built on your sacrifice. You owe no loyalty to a child who committed this against you. You do not have to protect her. As for the money, she continued, her voice softening slightly, I have a nephew, Elias, who is an excellent lawyer specializing in financial fraud and elder abuse. He's patient, he's ethical, and he's brilliant. I am going to call him first thing tomorrow morning and ask him to take your case. I will cover any initial retainers or fees. You will pay me back only when we win. You will not worry about the finances. I tried to pull my hands away, overwhelmed by her generosity. I cannot accept that, Victoria. You have done too much already. I can't let you pay for my problems. Victoria smiled, a sad, compassionate smile. Clara, I am 78 years old. My husband left me very well provided for. I have more money than I need, and my children are established. Let me do this. Not out of pity, but because it is the right thing to do. Because you deserve justice, and you deserve someone to stand up and fight for you. Tears streamed down my face again. But these were different tears mixed with relief and the first fragile stirrings of hope. Victoria embraced me, a solid, warm hug that chased away the cold of the damp apartment. The next morning the phone rang early. It was Victoria, energetic and purposeful. Good morning, Clara. I've spoken with Elias. He has reviewed the photos of the documents I sent last night. He says you have a highly defensible case, with clear elements of fraud and misappropriation. He wants to meet with you today. I can pick you up in 2 hours. Yes, I said, sitting up in my bed. That works perfectly. I dressed in my best clothes, the worn brown dress and presentable black shoes. I was tired, but the purpose was a fire in my chest. I was going to sue my own daughter. The thought was painful, yet inevitable. Victoria picked me up exactly on time. On the way to the office, she described her nephew. Elias Herrera, 42 years old, specializes in civil and financial fraud cases, often involving family betrayal. He is very skilled at handling the emotional side, Clara. He understands that this is about more than money. We arrived at a downtown office building. Elias's office was professional, lined with law books and framed certifications. Elias himself was a man with kind eyes and metal-framed glasses, dressed in a crisp suit. He stood and extended his hand. Mrs. Clara, it is an honor to meet you. My Aunt Victoria has given me the preliminary details. I must tell you, your case is exceptionally strong. We sat down. Elias opened a file. What your daughter did, taking you to sign property transfer documents under the guise of refinancing, is fraud by inducement to error. When she sold the property and kept the equity, she committed unjust enrichment. And her presentation of the sworn affidavit claiming you received the full value is forgery. I shifted nervously. Elias's voice was calm and measured. As I understand it, your daughter sold the house for $180,000. You only received $5,000. We are fighting to recover the principal equity of approximately $130,000, plus accrued interest over the 3 years, and damages for forcing you to live in inadequate housing. She will fight this, Mrs. Clara, Elias warned, looking directly into my eyes. She will hire the most expensive lawyers. She will deny everything. She will argue you were fully aware of what you signed. She will try to make you look mentally frail or incompetent. This will be an emotionally painful process. Are you prepared for her to say very cruel, false things about you? I took a deep, steadying breath, thinking of Audrey's cold eyes at the restaurant. Yes, I said, the word ringing with finality. I am prepared. I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want her to get away with it. Elias smiled faintly. Then we will fight and we will win. We have the evidence and we have the truth. We spent the next 2 hours going over every detail, every conversation, every document. I signed the legal representation papers and the authorization to proceed with the lawsuit. My hand was steady this time. Once this lawsuit is filed, Mrs. Clara, Elias concluded, gathering the papers, your relationship with your daughter will be severed, perhaps irrevocably. Are you certain you want to proceed? I looked at Victoria, who gave me a silent nod of support. I thought about the cold, damp walls of my flat, the poverty, and the ultimate betrayal. I am completely certain, I said firmly. The daughter I raised died the day she stole my home. What remains is a stranger who needs to be held accountable for her actions. 10 days crawled by, a long, agonizing stretch of waiting. Elias filed the civil lawsuit as promised. I remained in my damp, moldy flat, but my mindset had shifted. I was no longer a victim. I was a claimant seeking justice. Victoria called me daily, a steady, supportive presence, often inviting me for tea at her beautiful sunlit home. We talked about her life, my late husband, and Audrey when she was a sweet, small child. On the 11th day, Elias called. His voice was grave. Mrs. Clara, I need you to come to the office immediately. Your daughter has responded to the lawsuit, and there are some developments we must discuss in person. Victoria picked me up within the hour. Whatever it is, we face it together, she promised, squeezing my hand during the silent drive. In Elias's office, several documents were spread across his large desk. He looked serious but not defeated. Your daughter has hired a very aggressive, expensive law firm, Elias began. They have filed a response denying all our allegations. They claim you signed the documents voluntarily, that you fully understood you were transferring the property to Audrey's name, and that the $5,000 was a voluntary gift, not payment for the house. That is a complete fabrication, I exclaimed, my anger flaring. I know, Elias said, raising a calming hand, but there is more. Her lawyers have filed a countersuit. I stared at him, bewildered. A countersuit? For what? They are alleging that you owe Audrey money, Elias explained. They claim she lent you $25,000 over the years for various medical and personal expenses, and that you have failed to repay her. Victoria leaned forward in disbelief. That's preposterous. Clara lives on $750 a month. How could she possibly repay $25,000? And where is the proof of these loans? Exactly my argument, Elias affirmed. I have demanded they present concrete evidence, contracts, signed promissory notes, bank transfers. So far, they have presented nothing substantial. It's a delay tactic, a means of putting us on the defensive, but it won't work. Audrey never lent me $25,000, I stated, the lie cutting deeper than the financial fraud. She never lent me anything. The only $5,000 I received was after she stole my home. I need you to compile a detailed statement of every single financial interaction you've had with your daughter over the last 5 years, Elias instructed. Every conversation, every gift, every monetary exchange. We will use it to tear down their countersuit. Elias informed me that Audrey's team had requested mandatory mediation before a full trial. This was my right to accept or refuse. I want the mediation, I said without hesitation. I want to look her in the face. I want to see her look me in the eye and repeat those venomous lies directly. The mediation was set for 2 weeks later in a neutral government building. The 2 weeks were agonizing. I rehearsed my words, determined to remain calm and dignified. The day arrived. Victoria and Elias were with me. Elias reiterated his advice. Stay calm, Mrs. Clara. Do not be provoked. We have the truth. We have the evidence. We were led into a conference room. Audrey was already sitting there, flanked by 2 sharp-suited lawyers. Julian sat next to her, looking hollow and deeply uneasy. When Audrey saw me, her expression was cold, impenetrable, total stranger. The mediator, Julia Morales, a professional, middle-aged woman, began the session. Mrs. Clara, Julia said, please state your position clearly. I spoke, looking directly at Audrey. 3 years ago, my daughter tricked me into signing over the deed to my home, which I had worked 40 years to keep. She told me the papers were to protect the house from foreclosure. I trusted her. She then sold my home for $180,000 and kept the equity of approximately $130,000. I received only $5,000. This is fraud and I want my money back. Audrey's lead lawyer, an older man with an air of superiority, cleared his throat. Madam Mediator, my client vehemently denies these allegations. Mrs. Clara signed the documents voluntarily. A lawyer explained the process. Furthermore, my client has been extraordinarily generous, lending her mother $25,000 over the years, money which has yet to be repaid. Where is the proof of those alleged loans, counsel? Elias interjected smoothly. We have provided documentation showing a $175,000 shortfall between the house sale and the amount received by Mrs. Clara. We have a bank statement showing a single $5,000 deposit. Where is your evidence? Julia interrupted them both. Miss Audrey, I would like to hear your version directly. Can you explain your perspective on these events? Audrey sat up straighter. Her voice was steady, utterly devoid of emotion. My mother is suffering from mental confusion. She signed those documents knowing exactly what she was doing. I rescued her from losing the house to the bank. I saved her from being homeless. The $5,000 was a gift, money I was not obligated to give. I stared at her, the lie about my mental state being the final unforgivable insult. Audrey, I said, my voice quiet. Look me in the eyes and tell me you didn't lie to me. Tell me you explained that I was signing over my home, the home where you grew up. She held my gaze, her expression glacial. I didn't deceive you, Mom. You simply refused to understand the details. You are trying to blame me for your own mistakes and your poor memory. Elias slid documents across the table, directly in front of Audrey. Miss Audrey, here is the sales document showing $180,000. Here is Mrs. Clara's bank statement showing $5,000. Here is your sworn affidavit stating she received the full value. The math does not work, does it? Julian, who had been silent, finally spoke, his voice cracked with strain. Audrey, please. We need to find an agreement. This is tearing us apart. Audrey looked at him with fury. I am not giving her anything. I used that money for our house, Julian, for our life. If I give it back, we lose everything. Victoria spoke then, her voice cutting through the tension like diamond on glass. Audrey, I was at that dinner. I witnessed your deliberate act of humiliation. I know the truth. You used the sacred trust of your mother to steal her security, and then tried to blame her poverty on her mental state. You are willing to lie under oath to protect the money you took from the woman who worked cleaning houses so you could sit at this table today. Audrey's older lawyer banged the table. This is highly inappropriate, madam. We are here for mediation. He is right, Julia agreed. Let's stick to the facts. She looked at Audrey's lawyers. Counsel, can you now provide the evidence for the $25,000 loans? Audrey's lawyer opened his briefcase and produced several sheets of paper. We have handwritten receipts, signed by Mrs. Clara, detailing the loans. Elias quickly reviewed the receipts. He lifted them, his expression one of polite disdain. Madam Mediator, these receipts are all written in the same hand. with the same ink on identical paper. The dates allegedly spanned 3 years, yet they were clearly fabricated recently. This is falsified evidence, and a clear attempt to defraud the court. Audrey stood up abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. My mother is being manipulated by people who just want my money. I rose too, meeting her eyes across the long table. My voice, calm and clear, carried absolute finality. I will follow this lawsuit to the very end, Audrey. I will stand before a judge and tell the truth. When I win, and I will win, I will feel no satisfaction. Only the deep sadness for the daughter I lost when she decided money was worth more than her own mother. Julian placed a hand on Audrey's shoulder. Please, Audrey, give your mother back what belongs to her. It's not worth destroying everything for this money. Audrey ripped his hand away. You don't understand. I need that money. Julian looked at her with profound disappointment. If everything we own is built on what we stole from your mother, then it is worth absolutely nothing, he stated quietly. The mediator ended the session, recommending the case proceed to trial immediately due to the lack of good faith from Audrey's side. The trial took place 2 months later. The courtroom was packed. Victoria sat directly behind me, her presence a silent fortress. Julian did not attend. I later learned he had filed for divorce immediately after the failed mediation. The judge, a stern, elderly gentleman, reviewed all the documents, the bank records, and the expert testimonies presented by Elias. He heard my testimony, the story of my husband's death, the years of labor, the fraudulent signing, the $5,000. He heard Audrey's testimony, her insistence that I was mentally confused, that I had been fully aware of the sale. Elias systematically dismantled every part of her defense, proving that the lawyer present during the signing was hired by Audrey, and that the receipts were forged. On the final day, the judge announced his verdict. After reviewing all the evidence, this court finds that Miss Audrey acted with clear fraudulent intent, inducing her mother, Mrs. Clara, to sign property transfer documents under false pretenses. The evidence of the falsified affidavit regarding the sale proceeds is undeniable. The gavel slammed down. Therefore, I order Miss Audrey to return the sum of $130,000 to her mother, plus accrued interest over the past 3 years, which totals $35,000. Furthermore, Miss Audrey shall pay all legal costs incurred by the plaintiff, and a fine of $7,000 for presenting fabricated evidence to this court. The total financial recovery was massive, $172,000. 6 months later, after Audrey's exhausted appeals failed and the full amount was paid, I moved into a new apartment. It was small but bright, comfortable, and most importantly, free of mold. The hot water worked perfectly. I had a significant savings account for the first time in years. Victoria became my dearest friend. We had coffee every week. She helped me realize that family isn't always blood. Sometimes, it's the people who choose to stand by you when your own blood abandons you. I never spoke to Audrey again. I heard she had to sell the mansion and move into a smaller place, financially ruined and abandoned by Julian and many of his family members. I felt no triumph, only a deep sense of closure and peace. One afternoon, sitting by the window in my sunny new living room sipping tea, I looked at the sunset painting the sky. I had lost my daughter, but I had regained my dignity. I had learned that it is never too late to fight for yourself, that dignity is worth more than any price, and that the most important people in your life are often the kind strangers who arrive when you need them most. I smiled. This was living. This was peace.